Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, everyone. This is Laurie Smith on Blog Talk Radio. Good evening. It is 9:30 p.m. here in Calgary, Alberta, Wednesday night, September the 29th. I'm happy to be here. This is Child Abuse Prevention and Human Rights Abuse Prevention is Up to Us, 30-minute live internet streaming radio broadcast from blogtalkradio.com. And tonight I want to continue looking at www.irvingstudios.com/child_abuse_survivor_monument. And there's a few more articles on there that I kind of wanted to bring up. It's such good information, and I'm really enjoying it myself. I like that website. There's tons and tons of information on it regarding what is child abuse, and how to report it, and how parents can get help. And then also it's a great website for survivors of child abuse because Michael C. Irving is a psychotherapist, he's a sculptor, and he is a survivor of child abuse. And he created that website as well as the Child Abuse Survivor Monument in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. And it's been a few years now that it's been completed, but if you go on the website, you can actually see the monument. I've never been there personally to see it in person, but I'd love to see it. And the website's great. Lots of good information on there, and I hope you will check it out. But tonight I wanted to talk. I'll bring up the link here in just a second. But we've left off with the types of abuse, right? So now I want to look at responses to abuse, right? And some of it we've already kind of covered, I think, in previous shows of mine, and except for this one section, which is how to get help to prevent you from being abusive, right? And this would be for anyone who may have grown up in the cycle of abuse, whether you grew up in a home with a lot of violence or domestic violence, child abuse, violent behavior, criminal behavior, just a whole cycle of abuse, right? And so many of us have. And so it's important to take a look at this. But even for people who were not abused as children, this is it's good information, for people just to know, what happens with the cycle of abuse and how it's perpetuated on, right? And really anyone has a potential to be an abuser, and that's what they're talking about here. So that's what I want to talk about tonight. I'm not a counselor or therapist. I'm not a professional counselor or therapist. I don't hold any certificates in that area. I'm just a private citizen paying to do my own blog talk shows. And, I'm a student really in between courses. I can't afford to go to finish my certificate program. And unfortunately, so I'm still studying. I study all the time, regardless of whether I'm in classes or not, because this is what I'll be doing for the rest of my life. So I'm just continually looking at information and what's out there. And I'm the Canada Regional Director for Dreamcatchers for Abused Children, volunteer position, which I love doing. And I just want to be one more public voice speaking out against abuse, standing up for children's rights, and to raise awareness, education, and prevention of child abuse, right? So that's the whole issue. We all have to get involved in whatever way we can, right? And so as long as we're all doing something, it should really make a difference, and it should help, right? But you have to listen at your own discretion. The topics of abuse are very sensitive, and I say this on all my shows because I'm talking about abuse, and so a lot of people find the subject of abuse very, uncomfortable. Let's just put it that way. So you have to know what's good for you to listen to, and if you think it might trigger you or it just could be really something that might make you really uncomfortable to listen to, then it's your prerogative to turn the show off, and because you would not be hurting my feelings at all, right? We have to be safe. We have to know what's good for us to listen to, and so make the right decision for yourself and the right choice for yourself, right? If you're a young person under the age of 18, I just ask that you would have permission to listen to my show, whether it's a parent or caregiver, someone older, a teacher, counselor at school maybe. You could have them listen to one of my shows and see if it is something that you should be listening to. I have no idea how young the people are who are listening to my shows because I don't know where the Blog Talk players are now. They can be placed around on different sites and different websites, and so you have to. I'm all about protecting children, right? That's the whole issue. I'm trying to save children's lives in regards to public speaking and advocacy work. So I encourage young people to learn how to keep yourself safe when you're online. It is so important when you're in a chat room or you're online on certain social networking sites, anywhere. I don't care where you're at. If you're online, you are vulnerable because there's hundreds of thousands of child sexual predators and pedophiles online all the time looking to get a hold of children to sexually assault them, to exploit them in some manner. So you have to be very careful. And so get the information. Type into your browser internet safety or internet safety for children, online safety for children, right? Parents can do this too. Parents should do this and find out how to keep your family safe, right? It's really important. So that's why I ask all young people under the age of 18 to have permission to listen to my show. You'd be doing yourself a favor and me a favor by doing that, right? And I do care. Otherwise, I wouldn't be doing these shows. You know what I mean? So that's the whole thing. You just, you can't do enough to keep yourself safe. And that's what we're all about, trying to protect children and save children's lives, right? So we'll get right on into this article here. It says how to get help to prevent you from being abusive. And this is from www.irvingstudios.com, IRVING studios.com /child_abuse_survivor_monument/prevention.htm. And if you just type into your browser Irving Studios or Child Abuse Survivor Monument, it will come up, right? And it's the great information. I just love this information. It's an awesome website. And all the art and the poetry, the stories of the people, the survivors who, and others, supporters, contributed to this actual monument, the Child Abuse Survivor Monument in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. It's just awesome. You can see all the poetry that these survivors have written. Actually, it's very sad when you read it because it's all about the abuse that they suffered, and but some of it is, helpful, right? But a lot of it is very sad and disturbing. Thing is it deserves attention. They deserve to have their voices heard, and I'm so glad that Michael C. Irving did this, and this is a great website. So it says I'm just reading right from the page, and you can pick this up right there too. It says we all have the potential to be abusive. Abuse can be intergenerational, but the cycle can be broken. So it says to admit you have the potential to be abusive is very difficult. Most abusers were themselves abused as children, it says. However, at the same time, most child abuse survivors will not become abusers, and that's true. They've done the studies on it. They've done enough studies on it to know that not everyone who's been abused as a child will go on to abuse their own children, because many will they know what it's like to suffer as a child, so they don't want their children to suffer through the same thing that they did, so they'll take extra precautionary steps to make sure that they don't abuse their own children, right? But sadly enough, there are many that don't break the cycle, and I'm a perfect example of that because my parents did not break the cycle. I broke the cycle, but I don't have any children. But I would venture to say that I would not have abused my children because I would have got help, see, whereas my parents didn't get help. They were told to get help. They were told to get court-ordered counseling. I went to 2 sessions, and that was it. So, and back in the 1960s, who was enforcing it? You know what I mean? It wasn't such a, an enforced thing back then. It just fell through the cracks, and there you go. But anyone can be an abuser. Anyone has a potential to be abusive, right? So we all have to be accountable for our own behaviors. And, if we were abused as children, that does not give us the excuse or the right to say, well, I was abused, so that's why I abused my own children. It doesn't fly. And, we have a choice. Abuse is a choice. And, people choose to abuse. Parents make the choice. When they lash out at their child whether it's physically, verbally, sexually, or neglect, they are doing that on their own accord. It's just what they're doing. It's their choice. No one has to burn a child. No one has to physically abuse a child. No one is forced to sexually assault a child. This is all abusers choosing to do these things. So abuse really, to me, if you ask me, it's 100% preventable, right? And that's why it makes me mad that we can't stop it, because we can't change people's minds about how to treat their children and how to treat their families, right? But we can change our own minds. So if you grew up abused, you can make the choice to not do that to your own children or to anyone else's children, and you can make the right choice and say, you know what, I will get help before I do that. You know what I mean? If I can't cope and I think I'm going to lash out at my family, I'm going to get help. And, make it a serious commitment to yourself and to your family, right, that you would not carry the cycle on. It says stressful times and situations for parent and child are the most difficult times for a parent who is an abuse survivor. Old feelings and issues are triggered by the stress, and when stress is high, the parent may be living more in the past rather than the present. And so reducing stress and learning coping strategies for managing stress and emotions are some of the best things you can do for you and your children. In reaching out and seeking help, you are not alone. This is an important first step in abuse prevention and is something everyone can do. Resources to assist with parenting difficulties and skills can include crisis lines, support groups, daycare workers, community groups, community mental health facilities, inpatient treatment, family doctors, psychiatrists, therapists, and even employment assistance programs. Yeah, there's a lot of support out there for people nowadays. Back in the old days, there wasn't, but nowadays there really is. And when people say, "Well, I didn't know who to call," it's like, well, just look around. Start looking around. You can, in the front of people's phone books, most likely in the front of the white pages, there's generally a bunch of lines like crisis lines, youth crisis lines, substance abuse lines, hotlines, crisis lines, suicide prevention hotlines, and child abuse hotlines and reporting child abuse numbers and whatnot, all kinds of stuff. Shelters, a lot of times, will be listed in there, unless you have a really small phone book and you live in a real rural area where there might not be the same types of services available. But if you live in a city of any size, generally there's some support lines there. And I would hope so anyway. And there's bound to be some places that just don't have it, right, because of the lack of there's just not enough people in the community to support something like that. And that would be really sad. But then that's when you just go online, if you have a computer, and you start looking for some, 1-800 numbers to places like, for parenting issues, for parents who are out of control and need help and need somebody to talk to, coping, to help them cope, and for, to report child abuse and whatnot. And I think just by contacting any healthcare provider, like let's say you don't have a whole lot of stuff in your area because you live in a really rural area, call the nearest city's 1-800 healthcare number and just say, look, I'm in a rural area and I need some, even just a telephone call to a crisis line, but I don't have that information, they'll generally find some numbers for you, right, to try to get you some help, because that's just the whole thing. There's no shame in reaching out and getting help, but there is a whole lot of shame in people not getting help and then abusing their children or abusing their partners. Those are the people where the shame lies on them because they did not reach out and get some help. There's no shame in making the phone call and saying, hey, I need help. There's so many people out here that need help, it's just not even funny. And so there's nothing wrong with that, and you're not alone. And so I like this, what he said here, he's like, in reaching out and seeking help, you are not alone, and that is so true. There's so many people going through the same types of things, stress and all kinds of different issues that come up in people's lives that just cause them to, just pushes you over the edge. And then if you have children and they're kind of, pushing and pushing the wrong buttons all the time, it can be very, very stressful, So you don't want to lash out at your children. It's better to get some help and learn how to cope and deal with things and set your family on a course of learning how to problem solve together and developing a good relationship with each other to know, hey, we're developing into this strong family. We're learning how to cope with our issues. We're learning how to be a really an awesome family. And I wish that for everybody, right? But unfortunately, sadly enough, so many people don't get help. And the children pay the price for it, obviously, and it is always the abuser's fault because abusers are doing what they're doing, and they have a choice not to, right? So it could never be the child's fault, right? So that's the whole issue. It's the adult in this situation. It's their fault, and if they don't get help, that is their fault too. And many people like to excuse it away, and say, well, I don't need help, or you're the one that needs help, or what, whatever, and that's just, not the case. And so it's real sad when people won't take accountability for their own behaviors, but we have to, and it's so important to do that, right? So it says having good parenting role models can be valuable in learning new language skills and approaches for being with children. So, even with, seeing a doctor, family doctor, inpatient treatment, talking to other parents, having good parenting role models can be valuable. So just talking to other parents and see what they do to learn how to cope and Because especially if you were brought up in an abusive home or abused as a child, quite often you didn't have, like myself, did not have good parenting role models, right? So, or good adult skills on how to function and cope as an adult. And so, when you grow up around that kind of stuff, you need some examples to sort of set you on the right path. You know what I mean? So you want to start looking around for people who are stable, who you can kind of copy and mimic their behaviors and see what they do to learn how to cope and to change some of your behaviors, right? And that's what I've had to do my whole life. And it's a hard road for sure, but it's totally doable. And that's the thing, we have to stay with it. And this can affect anybody. You don't have to have been abused as a child to be going through this. Just any number of things can cause people to have crisis and trauma in their life, and and then they make the wrong choices. They handle things wrong and end up hurting their family, end up hurting their children, end up hurting themselves, and it all could have been prevented, all preventable. So it says to prevent one's children from being abused, one must be aware of and recognize the potential to be abusive and take ownership of the need to seek out assistance. It says help is available. You recognize that you are not bad and alone. And this is an important first step in abuse prevention, and it's something everyone can do. So that's what they wrote there. Discussion, how to get help to prevent from being abusive. This is the discussion portion of this. Some help can be provided by experts in the support groups, doctors, psychiatrists, and others. Hearing stories from others, calling a crisis line from others, accessing the EAP program for self and family, employee assistance program, and finding healing community and other supports will also help. That's just reaching out, I think, is the thing. As I started to reach out, I really started to move forward at a really rapid rate in my healing and recovery. And it's just because I reached out and I got some validation and I got some support, whereas I didn't have any support because I was keeping it all inside and I was just, existing in this day-to-day walk, and wasn't getting any help. So it's really important for people to get out and get help, right? And I use my family a lot. I talk a lot about this stuff on my One Child Abuse Survivor to Another show in the morning, because that's my show just devoted really strictly to adult survivor issues of child abuse, right? And the reason I talk about my family is because it was so dysfunctional and it was so just destroyed, by abuse and domestic violence. And, I like to use my family as an example for people, because so many times people they don't feel comfortable talking about their own stories, but if they can hear somebody else, they think, man, okay, here's somebody who's been through this and they know what it's like, and okay, I'm not alone. And it's good to have people in your life that can sort of help to validate things, to say, look, yeah, I've been there and I've experienced this and that, and maybe I didn't quite. We all don't experience everything the same. We're all different, and that's what makes the world a great place. We're all different, but in one sense, some of it is close enough that we kind of say, I totally know what that would feel like. I've been there, and it is very hard on people. But it's good to have that support. And if you don't reach out and get help, then you just sit and you just stagnate. You just sit in this silence, and people, don't deserve that, right? So I myself am happy I reached out, and I wish I would have reached out a long time ago. And I really wish that I would have got a counselor or a therapist many, many years ago. And unfortunately, that didn't happen. And at some later date in my lifetime, when I have some extra money or benefits, I'll do that, right? This is going on with this website here, sir. It says this experience will be different for everyone. There may still be a blaming of self for what happened. Knowing that you have a problem and trying to deal with it yourself is not enough. Help is available. You must recognize that you are not bad. So this is for anybody who might have been abused or think that they're lashing out at their children and hurting their children and families. They don't want to, and they think because they've been abused themselves, right? This is mainly for survivors who can pass the cycle on, right? It says admitting that you need help is difficult. To admit that you have the potential to be abusive is very difficult. And we encourage people to get help with physical problems, but emotional issues are treated differently and are not disclosed. As a society, We are not prepared to take ownership of the effects of abuse on society and individuals, as well as the overall cost of abuse to society. Breaking the cycle of abuse is critically important. It says funders and governments need to get involved. Abuse and abusive behavior can be passed on through generations, and we need to develop an awareness of the problem. Help is available, but it is not as widespread as it should be. And that's just a fact, and that's what I'm doing. That's why I thought, I can't sit back on the couch any longer knowing what I know and living through what I lived through and getting this far and actually making it this far and not saying something to me was just like, I thought, there's no way. I mean, why am I sitting here? I know what this is like. I should be helping people or trying to do something to help to stop child abuse because I know what it's like and what I'm going to sit here and pretend that it never happened and just keep silent and quiet about it for the rest of my life. I thought, no way. And not only that, I wanted to be a voice for my brothers because my brothers went to their graves with nobody knowing really how they grew up and how they were treated when they were young, especially in their teenage years. And people would just think they were losers, right, because they were drug users and big-time drug users and got in all kinds of trouble and did prison time. But they never, it was all for stuff like robbing pharmacies, robbing banks and things for money. But they never hurt anybody. They just wanted their drugs, right? So very, very sad. One of my brothers was doing a lot of prison time and stuff, but they slipped through the cracks, and I thought, if I don't be their voice, then no one will ever know because nobody else in my family is going to speak up about it ever. So I thought, okay, I have to do it. You know what I mean? And I wanted to do it because I thought, no way can I go to my grave with this information. So I wrote my story, and you can see that on my Blog Talk Radio page here, A Life of Death or Redemption. It was a blog. It was a public-facing blog on Blogger called Not So Fond Memories Growing Up in an Abusive Home, and it got turned into the book, A Life of Death or Redemption, and really no changes to it. They, Donna Shear and Sandra Potter of Dreamcatchers for Abused Children just left it like it was. They said, no, your voice is powerful and you need to tell your story with your own voice. We're not going to change it. And they just fixed a couple of grammar errors that I had made and things like that. But the book is the same as my blog, so if anybody would like to pick that up, all the proceeds are going to Dreamcatchers for Abused Children because I don't want the money for that book. I'm really so grateful to them for believing that my voice, is worth listening to, and that my story is worth reading, and that it might help somebody down the road, right? And help survivors and help to stop child abuse, and I think that's awesome. And so, I was so happy to see that book come about, right? I always thought it was just going to be a public-facing blog for the duration, but I wanted to be a voice for my brothers. Mainly, that's why I wrote it, and also for myself because I thought, man, I do not want to go to the grave with this information. Somebody's got to talk about it. Nobody in my family is willing to stand up, so I am, and I thought, okay, you face the consequences, and whether you can maintain relationships with a dysfunctional family after disclosing abuse. Well, I weighed the consequences out, and it was worth it to me to tell my story. So, to tell our story, and in hopes that it would help people, right? Because awareness is the issue. See, if every society wants to see all this shut down, shoved under the carpet, nobody wants to talk about abuse. Nobody wants to see abuse. They don't want to see these children being abused. They don't want to see the headlines. They don't want to see the pictures of the abused children. They don't want to see anything like that because it's so horrible. When you think about it, it's just so disgusting and horrible. But yet, if we don't look at those pictures and headlines and talk about this, and let's say that just for 10 years we never see anything about it, what will be done to stop child? Absolutely nothing. Because nobody will stand up and direct where the funding should go. Nobody will stand up and say, more for this, we need more money for that, more money for programs to prevent child abuse. We need money for education in schools. We need money for, programs for first-time offenses with CPS and DHS to step in and monitor the family and, for a long, long time. It's just to make sure that the children are not being abused, right? There are programs that do work, but they're just not funded, right? So that's the whole issue. Without awareness, if we don't know about a problem, how can you fix it? If you don't know something's wrong, how can you fix it? You can't. So that's why it's so important to raise our voices and to speak out about this, right? To stand up and say, you know what, hey, this needs to change. We need to stop child abuse. I'm ashamed to say it. I'll just say it every day for the for the duration of my life, right? Because it's so true. We really do need to stop child abuse, and it's 100% preventable, which makes me extremely mad. It's not like it's sad enough when you see children dying from childhood diseases and whatnot, and that is so sad, right? Childhood cancers and whatnot, and you feel so bad for those children and those families, because they love their children and they wish they could find a cure. And then yet you have a whole other set of people who are killing their children, and if they don't kill them physically, they end up in a body bag, well then they'll kill them spiritually and in every other way for the rest of their lives until they can get away from them. Child abuse kills in every way. So that's the whole issue, right? It is preventable. It's 100% preventable. So if you've been abused, do not pass the cycle on. That's the importance of this article, right? It's a major issue for abusers. It is vitally important for an abuser to accept that he or she has a problem and to know that brought up on child abuse charges back when I was a toddler, just a young toddler. And my brother had gone to school with bruises, and he told the school counselor, the school nurse, that he was afraid to go home. And so we almost lost us. Mom went to court, and they pleaded and begged the judge to let them keep us, right? And the judge said, "Oh, you have to go to counseling," right? So court counseling, and they went for 2 sessions, but they both blamed each other for everything, and it was never their fault. And of course, my mom was my main abuser. My dad and my mom, and he was also my abuser. So the two of them would never take responsibility for it. And even today, my dad is still living and still will not take responsibility for it. So my mom, of course, would never apologize for the way she treated me. So denial is huge. And then, of course, my siblings are in denial too, because they don't want to admit what happened in the family. Even though they'll talk about it to me, they would never admit it to anybody else because they're too embarrassed. It's the whole shame issue, right? So I'm like, you know what? I was much more uncomfortable being abused than I am talking about it. You know what I mean? I mean, let me tell you. So that's what the issue is for me. It's so important to talk about it. And if we don't talk about it, then we've got a real, you know what I mean? We have to stop child abuse, and the only way to do it is to raise our voices. It says attitudes about abuse need to be changed. We need more programs to help us in dealing with the behavior. We need to develop different techniques to deal with the abuse. A paradigm shift must occur in the way that we educate society on what is acceptable behavior. That's so true. Self-recognition and taking responsibility for his or her own behavior are important factors in the abusers preventing themselves from becoming abusive. Awareness of their own triggers of abuse, support from parents, friends, neighbors, and professionals, and the creation of balance in their lives will all help as well. And we must deal effectively with children's anger when we encounter it. Adults need to take more responsibility. Timeouts for children and adults are also useful. And abusers need to have access to people they can trust so they can talk about the abuse. Not enough time and attention is given to this issue. People do not want to see the signs. You bet they don't. Abuse, my mom used to hit me in the head, so I always had bruises on my face and scratches and, on my arms and whatnot. And people saw it and they just let it go. Split lips and people just let it go, right? It's like, oh, well, they didn't want to see it, right? So many times people will overlook the signs of abuse, right? And I was always crying and kind of freaked out when I was really little. So, people should have been able to see that I was emotionally disturbed, right? So it makes me mad that people will not learn the signs and symptoms and learn to recognize the different types of abuse and then do the right thing and report it and get these children some help, right? It says people do not want to see the signs. Abuse can be intergenerational. We all have the potential to be abusive, right? So there's just a little bit more left. There's quite a bit more left to this article. So I guess maybe we'll finish up here on Friday with this one. So go to that link if you'd like to finish that yourself, www.irvingstudios.com and /child_abuse_survivor_monument /prevention.htm, and that'll take you there, and you can read the rest of that, self-care and different things. So it's great information. I hope you will check it out. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in to all my shows. I really appreciate it, and I'll be back on tomorrow morning again, same time, one child abuse survivor to another, 6 a.m. Mountain Standard Time, and then Friday morning as well. So have a great night, everybody. Take care of yourselves, and keep reaching out. Keep looking for that hope. You do count. You do matter. If you're a survivor out there, I'm going to keep on reminding you, you reach out and get some help, and don't suffer in silence, and just make sure you take care of yourself. You deserve a good life, right? So I'm sure, as a child we were not told that. So you do deserve to have a good life, but we have to fight for it. We have to go to do it, So thanks everybody for tuning into all my shows, and have a great night, and we'll talk to you real soon. Bye-bye.